So this is the case study on navigating change, which navigating change is obviously the overarching theme for this year's conference. I'll go ahead and start by reading the bios of the three panel members here. I'm going to start in the middle with Christina. Christina DuPont is a member of the Texas Optimization Program in the Drinking Water Supply Division of the TCEQ. She holds a bachelor's degree in bioenvironmental science and a master's degree in environmental microbiology from the Texas A&M University. She has worked for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality since 2016. Her current position with the agency gives her the opportunity to provide technical assistance to public water systems related to disinfection and nitrification action planning, surface water treatment, to include membrane filter technology and emergency contingency planning. And if you want to get on our good side, her spouse loves John Denver. All right, Clayton Nicolardi right next to me. He won't hold my hand. I'm not sure why. I'm nervous.
It's too sweaty.
Clayton Nicolardi is a senior engineer with TCEQ's Office of Water and Water Supply Division, Emergency Preparedness and Response Section. Clayton is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and a U.S. Army veteran. I won't hold it against him. Go Air Force. He has worked for the TCEQ for 18 years, 16 of which have been spent assisting public water systems across the state of Texas. Clayton is also a licensed surface water treatment plant operator and has worked in private sector as an operator and consulting engineer. He enjoys hobbies such as spending time with his family, hunting, and fishing. And just a little secret, if you find yourself anywhere around Lake Livingston and you see Clayton in his bass boat, just load up and go home. You're not catching fish. All right, last but certainly not least is David Simons there on the end, is a senior engineer, the Texas Optimization Program Response Team. He received his Bachelor's of Science and Master's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from University of Texas at Austin. David worked for an environmental consulting firm in Dallas, held engineering positions with the cities of McKinney and Taylor, and worked for the civil engineering consulting firm in Austin area prior to taking a position at the TCEQ in 2013. He provides technical assistance to the public water systems and TCEQ regional offices and conducts on-site evaluations of surface water treatment plants and distribution systems. All right, so that's the bios. Okay, so this morning we're going to get into case studies of navigating change, and we're going to get into three specific areas this morning. The first area is going to be new technologies that drinking water treatment plants may consider utilizing to meet regulatory goals. And we're going to specifically talk about membrane treatment. Membrane plants are not anything new, but they're kind of exclusive in the state of Texas, so we're going to talk about those. We're also going to talk about some of the daily struggles that you as operators may have in terms of water quality changes with wholesale and purchase water systems. And then lastly, we're going to get into some resiliency and emergency preparedness, which is something that out of the Winter Storm Uri, we had Senate Bill 3, and so us as regulators, y'all as regulated, we're all kind of grappling with how that's going to manifest itself in reality as we implement those changes. So no matter what the size or type of your public water system is, whether you own it or you work at it, there will be the wonderful and interesting conversations that will be had for this panel. And let me just kind of break from script here for just a second and brag on the team here. You know, I tell you, these guys are the best in the nation at what they do. And yes, I said what I said. They are the best, the very best. So all of you have immense experience, and so does the team. And so it's a real opportunity to learn some stuff today with the team. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off, and I'm going to pitch the first question to Miss Christina. Sorry, I'll step up to the microphone here. So Chris, can you talk a little bit about membrane filters and how public water systems are using that technology?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So for some of you may know that membrane treatment in Texas really isn't that new. EPA did release their membrane guidance in 2005, and so since then, we have seen membrane filters installed from everything from surface water treatment to arsenic, metals, and general contaminant removal. Now, we at the state do expect to see membrane technology continue to be installed, especially as the EPA continues to release things like PFAS and PFOA. Membranes can be used to remove some of that stuff. Now, I do want to take this opportunity to say that us as a Texas Optimization Program have seen some growing pains from systems that have installed membrane filters. And so we just wanted to make you aware, as you maybe consider putting in membrane filtration, to be aware of some of those growing pains.
All right, thank you, Chris. So I'm pitched to David now. David, can you talk a little bit about treatment plants, especially surface water treatment plants that are using membrane filters?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So the TCEQ grants pathogen removal credit to low-pressure membranes. Those are your ultrafiltration membranes and your microfiltration membranes. So that makes those types of membranes really useful in surface water treatment plants. The TCEQ does not grant pathogen removal credit to RO, reverse osmosis, or nanofiltration membranes. So if you're using those at a surface water plant, you're doing it because you're trying to reduce TDS, or as Christina mentioned, maybe trying to take out a specific contaminant from the water. But in general, most of the time, we'll see the low-pressure membranes at surface water treatment plants. Now, those low-pressure membranes, they can be made out of polymer fibers, but they can also be made out of ceramics. We have about 80 public water systems in the state that are using low-pressure membranes right now, and that number just keeps increasing. We had originally planned on, evaluating like 5 new membrane plants a year. We hit 5, I think, in May of this year. So I mean, that's one of the reasons we're talking about this. Is it does seem to be a more and more prevalent treatment technology.
All right, thank you, David. Also, I forgot to mention, don't challenge David in Texas Hold'em or golf. You might be in trouble. I'm just saying. All right, so I'm going to open up this third question to the entire panel. So the question is, what considerations should a public water system that is currently using conventional filters think about as they either transition to a membrane filter system or add a membrane filter system to their conventional plant?
I'll take that one first. So one of the biggest differences between a conventional and membrane treatment at a surface water system is the monitoring and reporting requirements. Systems tend to not realize that the rules are a little bit different between those two types of systems. So understanding what those requirements are going to be for a membrane treatment facility is something that we'd like y'all to think about. And then the second one I'd like to talk about is membrane costs, or the maintenance costs on membrane filtration systems. There are going to be costs associated with replacing membranes, potentially hiring a contractor or someone with computer skills to make sure that the software for operating the membrane units is running and up to date. So those are additional costs that may not be incurred for a conventional system, but you do need to think about when transitioning to a membrane system.
Yes, that's very good points, Christina. Something to add, this third topic discussion is really, how do you budget for the maintenance and or replacing membrane filtration? There's a lot, higher cost involved. These plants, regardless of which, someone may tell you about they run themselves, that if somebody tells you that, run the other direction. So there's an upfront cost of membranes, but there's also replacement costs for the modules. And so you have to budget for that. Now, not all water quality is equal in the state of Texas, and even you can have a straw in the same source water and have different water quality. That may lead to premature fouling of a membrane. So some facilities may have a shorter lifespan on a module than others. So that has to be taken into consideration. Also, we've seen plants that say they've got, excessive carryover from the clarifier that, prematurely fouls the membrane. So all that has to be taken into consideration. And then there's a lot of automation involved with membrane over conventional treatment. And as such, you're going to have to find good technicians. Now, the operators in here, if I told you, you'd always say it's hard to find a technician, right? You may have to call a guy from California, and he may fly out and look at your system. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of hidden costs there.
I'd add to what Clayton was talking about on the replacement, and budgeting for that. Just the maintenance practices that your operators have to do can have a big impact on how long those membranes last too. And we've seen systems that have done poor maintenance, and they have pretty much ruined their low pressure membranes in only a few years. So that's a big consideration is maintenance on those. I think Clayton kind of hit on this. If you have a conventional plant right now, and you want those same conventional operators to run your new low-pressure membrane filtration system, there is a lot of training that they need because it's a different technology, different monitoring, reporting requirements. So there needs to be a significant investment in training your conventional operators how to use the membranes. Some other things, if you're thinking about switching to membranes, it does take a relatively long time to get approval to use low pressure membranes in a surface water treatment plant. A lot more steps than you would have if you were trying to get conventional treatment approved. So it can be, take quite a long time. It's usually we see 2 to 3 years is typical from start of the project till they actually get it constructed. So we think, if you're thinking about doing this, it'd be a good idea to ask other public water systems that that are using these low pressure membranes about, what are the pros and cons. I mean, they're, once they've been operating for a while, they're a great source of information, and especially operator to operator kind of information is really great. Last thing is, if you're thinking about switching, we do have a low pressure membrane checklist that's available on our website. I would recommend, taking a look at that just to get an idea of, what are we getting into if we go to like low pressure membranes for surface water treatment. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Anyone else on the panel have any further thoughts? Okay. So obviously, membranes are a deep hole we can go down. So the team is available to provide assistance on membranes, but we do need to transition to our next topic, which is navigating water quality changes for systems that purchase water from a wholesaler. And so we'll have 3 questions in this area. And I'm going to start off with Christina again, because I like picking on her. Chris, what are the most common water quality complaints from purchased water systems that the Texas Optimization Program receives?
Okay. So I would say that there are 2 complaints that we get most often. The first one is going to be disinfectant residuals. So we get calls from operators that says, I'm getting a low residual, it's detectable, it's there at my entry point, but it's just not strong enough to make it all the way out to the far reaches of my purchased water distribution system. That's the first one. The second complaint that we get most often is going to be related to DBPs. And we see this a lot, especially in the Texas summers, where DBPs can be low in the wholesaler's system, but then once it gets into the purchased water system, distribution system, those DBPs tend to become more elevated past non-compliant standards.
So we're very acronym heavy here at TCEQ. What are DBPs?
DBPs, disinfection byproducts. HAA5s, y'all might recognize that from your sampling, and TTHMs are going to be in those categories. Unfortunately, we also don't see many contracts between wholesalers and purchased water systems that designate anything more than the minimum quality standards for the water that is being purchased. And so then the wholesalers aren't obligated to address those complaints from the purchase water system because at the entry point, they are meeting their requirements.
All right, thank you, Chris. So to expand on that, I'm going to pick on Clayton over here for a second. Clayton, can you expand upon what purchase water systems can do to address low residuals?
Yes, absolutely. There's really only a couple of options for purchase water systems that are getting a low residual. You know, they can go beg the wholesaler to increase the residual leaving their treatment facility so that it's, you know, where you want it at your take point. There's, you know, can be some negative effects to that though as well. I mean, if the wholesaler increases their disinfection residual, can result in disinfection byproducts. It's also an added chemical cost to the wholesaler, right? What if I have to come in with, and I go over the threshold in gas chlorine storage at my plant, or anhydrous ammonia, and I have to have an emergency response plan, and when I'm in a neighborhood, and then I got to put on-site generation facilities in. So those are some of the things to consider is this additional cost to the wholesaler. The next option is that the purchase water systems could put in booster disinfection facilities at their take point. That's where they get their water from the wholesaler. You could put booster disinfection facilities in, but that's an elevated infrastructure cost because you got to put in the facilities, right? Then there's additional operations costs because then you have to send operators out to monitor and conduct maintenance on that equipment, to make chemical feed adjustments on feeder pumps and things like that. So it's much more involved on the purchaser to put in booster disinfection facilities. Now, there have been situations, I know TOP has been involved in trying to help communications between consecutive systems, purchase water systems, and the wholesaler, where the purchase water systems, you know, went to the wholesaler and said, hey, I'll cover part of the cost of the additional chemical costs that you have, and come up with some kind of agreement where, hey, I don't have to put in booster disinfection facilities, but I'm helping the wholesaler on their end. So there's opportunities there, and those aren't exhaustive, but just a couple of things that we see often.
Thank you, Clayton. So one last question in this area, and then we'll move on. So David, Clayton laid out some really good solutions to addressing low chlorine, but how about DBPs? We mentioned it, Chris mentioned it a moment ago, but how about DBPs? Can purchase water systems do anything to control the creation of disinfectant byproducts?
Thanks, Brian. The one thing that Clayton mentioned is that, you know, if, for instance, you're having low chlorine residual issues in your purchase system and you're trying to get the wholesaler to increase residuals, that can have a negative consequence on DBPs. If they raise their residuals, the DBPs coming in at your system may go up. It's not uncommon. So if you're already struggling at your take point or with TTHM or HAA5, that may not be the best option to get the wholesaler to raise residuals, and you might have to go with booster disinfection yourself just to kind of control how much DBP formation occurs in your system. But in general, if we're talking about purchase systems and DBPs, I want to say trying to treat the DBPs at your take point is really expensive. And in most cases, it's often just unrealistic to think, hey, we're gonna reduce the TTHM at the entry point so that we stay compliant. Typically the only realistic option is getting the wholesaler to reduce DBPs in their system. And a lot of times we're talking surface water. It's often a treatment plant issue for them. It's not so much necessarily a lot of formation in their distribution system, but there's things that they could address in their treatment plant to have more reasonable DBP levels at your take point. However, we have also seen examples of a purchaser receiving water and that water has reasonable levels of DBPs, but the purchaser adds their own booster disinfection, and all of a sudden now they're having excessive DBPs in their system. So, the typical situation is you've got a source water, the wholesaler source water has got some bromide in it and some TOC, total organic carbon. These pass through their treatment plant, and they're still in the water at your take point. Normally there'll be a chloramine residual at your take point in these situations to try to control DBPs, and the purchaser injects, tries to inject chlorine ahead of ammonia in the booster disinfection plant, or the other situation is they're only adding chlorine. There's no ammonia injection. So when you have that situation, what can happen is when you inject chlorine, free chlorine can react with the bromide that's still in the water to create bromine, and bromine reacts really fast with the total organic carbon to make DBPs. So that's not unusual to see. If you are going to do booster disinfection, and it's laid out in our rules, you've already had primary treatment, chlorine ahead of ammonia, but at your booster disinfection system, the preferred injection sequence is ammonia ahead of the chlorine, so that when the chlorine is injected, it's got lots of ammonia to react with. It'll react preferentially with the free chlorine before the chlorine reacts a whole bunch with the bromide and creates other problems. So just keep that in mind. Booster disinfection, it's in our rules. You can do ammonia before chlorine if this is a downstream of the primary treatment. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks, David. You got some more to add there, Clayton?
That was great, David. I was just going to mention one of the things that we see often. I was actually in the field last week and ran into this very situation. We had a purchase water system that was purchasing chloraminated water from the wholesaler. We're not going to mention any names, but so in this case, as you know, if you're purchasing water and you're booster disinfecting, water quality is very, very variable, right? I mean, the water you get from a wholesaler may one day have in this case, 0.7 milligrams per liter of free available ammonia. And so the water chemistry is changing daily. Well, the chloramine effectiveness sampling requirements that we have are really established on, weekly, that you have to take these chloramine effectiveness samples on a weekly basis. But what I'm seeing more often in the field is that operators are having to dial in stuff daily. That's very hard when you talk in terms of if you have 3 take points and you're booster disinfecting at multiple locations. When you have variable water quality, and you're trying to set a 5-to-1 ratio, it makes it very complicated on purchase water systems. So just to say that when you do this, you're talking about much more sampling required above and beyond what our minimum requirements are.
Okay, all right, thank you, Clayton. So bottom line up front, or the big takeaway here is that if you're a purchase system or a wholesaler, you guys need to be talking, right? Because things get complicated, and if you're not talking, and the team has seen this, again, no names, but we've seen it in the past, and it's an issue, okay? And problems don't get solved if we don't communicate. All right, so we're going to make our transition now into the last part of this talk, and that's going to be a resiliency and emergency preparedness. And I'm going to pitch this to Clayton. Clayton was very much involved after Winter Storm Uri in the development of some of the. It's not good. It's a bad word. It's a bad word. So he developed some generator guidance, and we'll have out on the streets here soon the Directed Assistance Module 13, which is resiliency. So he's been greatly involved with all that. So Clayton, the next question and the last question for this is. I'm basically going to leave it pretty wide open for you, not doing you any favors. But can you go ahead and talk to us about what resiliency is and how resiliency is important for water systems?
Okay, sure, I'll do my best. I'll throw in some fillers in there just so I don't have to talk about resiliency for 15 minutes. because I don't know if you guys you'll start walking away, and I'll have to go catch you. But really, this PDW conference, is focused on navigating change. So one of the things, one of the quotes that, I've known from the first time I heard it, I was like, I'm going to remember that because it's spot on. But Winston Churchill said, take change by the hand before it grabs you by the throat. And, in our industry, it's constantly changing. I mean, we're asking you guys, a regulatory agency, we're asking you to change. Your administrators are asking you to change, and it's a lot at one time. I mean, it seems like nothing ever comes like spread out, right, in this industry. It's like it comes down like in threes, and we're having to deal with it. So, as Brian said, and I hate to say Uri, because the reason why Uri caused so much, pain across the state is because it was so widespread. I mean, pretty much the entire state of Texas was impacted. If you saw the state map with all the affected water systems, it's just amazing. It's not just if you have, land adjacent to the sea. I mean, and you've got hurricanes to deal with, and like we had Harvey and all that. But whatever side you are on climate change, I'm not here to argue one side or the other, but climate change is a challenge for us as operators in the state. We're challenged with drought. Not up where I live in Tyler, close to Tyler, Texas, in northeast Texas, and so, Lake Palestine, last I checked, was like 1.5 feet over conservation level. So we tend to have, more water to go around. So we have hurricanes, we have drought. We recently had a lightning strike that hit a booster pump station, and fire burned it down. So you name it, we have it in terms of natural disasters. And so resilience, water resilience, refers to the ability of a water or wastewater plant or utilities to withstand these kind of events and then quickly recover after they're over. And so really that's just, in a nutshell, what resiliency is. It's how we can withstand, set our systems up, make preparations, whether that's preventative maintenance, hardening, our systems to withstand these kind of events. So I was going to give you all some examples of some of the events that I've gone on. When we did Harvey, for example, Harvey was a major flooding event, and we got dispatched to go down there and help some plants get back online after, Harvey with all the flooding. And one of the things that kind of frustrated me is we went and helped a water system that all their equipment was grade level, and and they're not below sea level, but they're darn close. And so they had a hurricane previously and lost basically all their electronics and all their pumps and everything to the hurricane. And then the insurance paid for them to just put tit for tat, just put the same exact stuff in there, and it flooded in Harvey. So, we can't expect different results, doing the same thing all the time. So I don't want to get too much into detail about the 87th legislator and the SB3, but that expanded, as you know, after Uri, it expanded the requirements to have an emergency preparedness plan. And so before it was just Harris and Fort Bend counties, right? And then SB3 expanded that to pretty much everybody. If you're serving overnight guests, pretty much your water system is going to have an EPP. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the details of that, but our TA room, if you have any questions, I'm going to shout out to them. If you have any questions about EPPs and navigating that, we have folks here that can help you, okay, that are smarter than me on that kind of stuff. So why is it important for us why is resilience important? Well, the common sense thing would say the continuity of water services and wastewater services. I mean, that's pretty much what it's about, right? We can't withstand every event that, God may throw at us. I mean, but we can do our level best to prepare for those events ahead of time. And so that's why it's so important for us to be prepared, because let's be honest, and I can be honest with myself, is that we often react to things rather than be proactive. And so that's what the emergency preparedness plans, that's what the drive is to try to get us to think about being proactive so that maybe we can get to a point where we're not running out of water, where we can provide drinking water. As you know, when we lose drinking water, there's a lot of vulnerabilities there. First of all, you get a lot of mad customers because we're so used to turning the tap on and flushing the toilet that we don't even think about the work that you all put into making that product, generating that product. We only miss it when we don't have it. And that's when everybody is pure pandemonium, right? But think about all the risks that we, put a system under when they lose pressure, when they lose continuity of service. Well, I mean, think about the hospitals. Think about, if wastewater plants aren't working, guess what? Sewage backs up. I mean, there's all these, it's like this net positive thing that, combined together just makes it a disaster. I was thinking about the Chicago fire in 1871. I was watching a documentary on this. I don't know if it was PBS. And so that changed a lot of the code enforcement rules back in the day. They didn't have elevated storage. And so it darn near burned the whole city down. I mean, they lost, like 300 people died, like 100,000 people were, lost their homes. I mean, it was terrible. And that kind of stuff can happen too when we lose continuity of service. And think about things in the world. It tend to, when we're at our weakest, that's when things happen, unfortunately. So I would say that if you have an EPP, one word of advice, I guess, hopefully I can give you guys, is don't just let it sit on the shelf. I mean, we can develop an EPP. The agency can even approve it. And I didn't get any laughs out of that. But if it just sits on the shelf and we don't use it, then it's not doing us one bit of good. Also, who in here thinks they got their EPP right the first rattle out of the bag? I don't ever do anything like first draft that's going to be perfect, right? I've got to go back and I've got to look and see what works and what doesn't work, and then I have to revise that EPP so that maybe I can withstand whatever storm comes my way. I'm going to talk a little bit about drought, and then I want to talk about cybersecurity because I don't think we talk enough about that. We've talked about Harvey. I've told you how you can prep your surface treatment plant for flooding. Drought is a big thing. Not in my neck of the woods, but I know that we deal with a lot of systems that are struggling with drought. And so how can you make your system more resilient? Well, you can partner with a system and interconnect for emergency interconnection. There's folks that are looking at desal and direct and indirect reuse. And so we're getting very creative. But there's a lot of things that a water system can do to prep for those droughts. I will tell you, a lot of the engineering design I've seen is kind of old school, right? And it's old school, I'm telling you, it's old school because if I put a variable level intake on a lake that's got like 20% of the water, I may have an intake low enough that I can get water when it's, when levels get low. But what we found is that a lot of systems have had to, put barge-type systems in just to chase water. So we have to get better preparing ourselves. for those kind of events to happen, because they will. They will happen. Real quick about Winter Storm Uri, and I am going to talk about it even though I hesitate, because I've just lived this stuff for the last 3 years. With Winter Storm Uri, we had an event that happened that was catastrophic to many systems. And we've learned a lot through our mistakes, and we've learned a lot through that disaster that happened. Please, like I said, you can't, Texas is Texas. We have some bad weather here. We have, things that happen. Make sure you prepare your water system for those freezing temperatures. I mean, we may never get it again, but the thing is it doesn't matter if it happens once every 50 years. It may just so well happen on your watch. And so we've got a lot of materials that are currently being developed. Brian mentioned Directed Assistance Module 13. Go figure, Dam 13, who would ever thought? It's a resiliency dam, and it's been piloted. Mark McCaslin is here. He's one of the instrumental folks that made that happen. And so we've got some training modules that are being developed to help you guys. Are they exhaustive? No. We like to learn from you guys. What are some of the success stories that you had during Uri? Because we need to hear that too. We hear enough of the bad stuff. We respond to when the water system is belly up, and we're trying to help, technically. We need to hear these stories. And if you got to come bend my ear or, whatever, David, Christina, come talk to us about it, because we can help. So I wanted to talk about cyber attacks. Technology, we talked about membrane technology. We talked about going from conventional to plant, which I'm comfortable with. I love conventional treatment. I'm sitting here looking at them at North Texas Municipal Water District. I like conventional treatment, but, as technology goes on, what we find out is that, we have all this automation. Some of it, you have to be 2% smarter than the equipment you're working with. I often find I'm quite like 1.75% smarter than the SCADA system or the HMI that I'm working with. But as technology goes on, and it's great, it allows us to control water plants, via our cell phone. It's great. But it also sets us up for hackers and to hack into our systems and gain control, maybe not full control, but even partial control of our facilities, and they can do significant damage. Just like our infrastructure has aged in terms of distribution, mains and the like, and water treatment plants, just like that has aged, SCADA systems, software, and PLCs have also aged. And guess what? The reason why your cell phone updates, my iPhone drives me crazy. The reason why it updates is because there's security patches and things that they put in there that prevent hackers from getting in there. So what I'm trying to say is that with the aged automation, we've also seen that it's easier for people to get in and hack that particular type of software. It's not like an iPhone. So I'll just give you some examples. Everybody remember Alquipa, Pennsylvania? You may have heard about them. I'm just going to give you some recent ones where Iranian hackers got in there and they actually gained partial control of the water pressure control system and caused major problems. Wichita, Kansas, a hacker got into the system at Wichita, Kansas, and actually hacked the billing and the meter information. And so, and then we've seen this in Texas too. So, y'all know where Muleshoe is? You probably don't. It's in the Panhandle. The point I'm trying to make is Muleshoe is just like a four-way crossing. And so they got hacked. So it doesn't matter if you're small or large system. It happens. And so, and that's all I have. I think I've run out of time. And then.
All right, before I cut you loose, since I've got you hostage, if I may take the liberty, I would like to introduce Chris, Clayton, and David are 3 of 7 folks that are on the top team. So down here in the middle is Charlie Middleton. Charlie, you want to stand up? This is Charlie. He's out of the Austin office. We have Nubia. Stand up, Nubia. She's in Abilene. We got Paige. She's down in Beaumont. Is Catherine with us today? Where's Catherine? Catherine's running our backflow and cross-connection program. Is Kristen Hernandez here? Kristen? Okay, maybe not. She's running our temporary management and receivership program. So that's the team, and I think I'm getting pulled off the stage by a very large man with long hair. All right, I'm turning it over to Jack. Thanks all.